It's Christmas Day, 1989. In just a few minutes, this grandpa and this grandma will stand trial. And if found guilty, they'll be executed. Although they are criminals, this couple isn't your typical pair of criminals. The woman is Elena Ceausescu, the First Lady of Romania, and the man, he's Nicolae Ceausescu, the President of Romania. After less than a day on the run, trying to flee the country following massive protests, they were eventually caught and dragged into court. They were charged with genocide, subversion of state power, by organising armed actions against the people and the government, attempting to flee the country with over $1 billion in foreign bank accounts, and many other crimes related to economic sabotage. And about an hour later, they were found guilty, tied up, and taken to their place of execution. But before they could be shot, Ceausescu made them an offer, and surprisingly, they agreed. But to understand how we got here, let's start from the very beginning. For over 4 decades, Romania lived under the grip of communism. After World War II, the country fell into the Soviet sphere of influence, and by 1947, the Romanian Communist Party, backed by Moscow, quickly consolidated control, banning all opposition and transforming the country into a one-party state. When Nicolae Ceausescu took over in 1965, he called Romania a socialist republic, but honestly, it wasn't really about socialism. It was all about control. Ceausescu built a rigid dictatorship marked by censorship, personality cults and surveillance. The feared secret police, the Securitate, infiltrated every level of society. Ceausescu's economic policies caused serious strain across the country. Tens of thousands of people were dealing with food shortages, constant blackouts, and heavy repression, while Ceausescu lived in comfort surrounded by massive palaces and obsessive over-the-top projects. A huge part of the national budget went toward paying off foreign debt, and everyday Romanians were left to face malnutrition and some of the highest infant mortality rates in Europe at the time. By the late 1980s, Romania was still calling itself communist, but Ceausescu's regime had turned into something much darker. Isolated, paranoid, and completely disconnected from its own people and the rest of the Eastern Bloc, which was already starting to fall apart. By 1989, revolutions in neighbouring countries gave people hope that change was possible. Still, Ceausescu kept pouring money into massive construction and propaganda campaigns, ignoring the unrest bubbling beneath the surface. Then came December, and everything changed. The spark was lit in Timișoara on December 16, 1989, when the government tried to evict a local pastor, Laszlo Tokay, a dissident Protestant clergyman who'd been speaking out against the regime. People didn't take it lightly. That night, thousands of locals flooded the streets, waving Romanian flags with the communist emblem torn out, and singing old patriotic songs like Dictators Roman. The atmosphere was electric. The following day, rioters took over the Communist Party's district headquarters in Timișoara, tossing party papers and propaganda out the windows. The army showed up with tanks and armoured vehicles, but things still spiralled out of control. Street fights erupted, and burned-out cars made parts of the city look like a war zone. The next day, 18 December, Ceausescu was away on a state visit to Iran, but the rebellion continued to intensify. Soldiers shot into defiant crowds, and dozens were killed that day. However, this didn't scare off the protesters. If anything, it did the opposite. Around 100,000 people flooded into Bucharest's Opera Square, packed with workers, students, and regular citizens. They chanted things like "Ceausescu is falling" in open defiance, demanding that he step down. But the government refused, and the crowd, it only got angrier. By December 21st, just 5 days after the protests first erupted, Ceausescu made a risky move. He organised a massive army-backed rally in Palace Square to show he was still in control. Standing on a balcony, he began delivering a speech, downplaying the unrest and blaming outside agitators. But within a minute, high-pitched cries and boos erupted in the distance. The TV broadcast caught him frozen at the microphone as the crowd turned hostile. Fearing for his safety, a bodyguard coaxed Ceausescu back inside. Moments later, the state TV feed cut to a shot of the sky as if nothing had happened, but the damage was done. Spontaneous protests and riots broke out across central Bucharest. By evening, the capital was in chaos. Tens of thousands chanted "Down with the dictator," and soldiers in the streets began defecting or refusing orders to shoot. On the morning of December 22nd, with Bucharest under martial law and workers swarming the city, the Ceausescus decided to flee. Around 11:20 a.m, they boarded the presidential helicopter from the rooftop of the Central Committee building and took off. The escape had begun. They first flew to Snegov, just outside the capital, then were directed toward T2. But things were falling apart fast. Down below, the army wasn't just ignoring orders, they had officially switched sides. A no-fly zone was declared. Any helicopter in the sky could now be shot down. Their pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Vasile Maluchan, eventually brought the helicopter down in an open field near the road to Pitești. Ceausescu demanded they pick up more soldiers, but one of the officers radioed back simply, "There's been a revolution. You're on your own now." With fuel running low and their escort gone, Maluchan told the couple he couldn't take them any farther. Now stranded, the Ceausescu's remaining bodyguard started flagging down passing cars. First came a forestry official's sedan, then a local doctor's Dacia, but the doctor faked engine trouble and drove off. Finally, a car pulled over, driven by a bicycle repairman named Nicolae Petrushaw. The Ceausescus climbed in and were driven west. He dropped them off at an agricultural technical school on the outskirts of Târgoviște. There, the director led them into an empty office and locked the door behind them. By around 3:30 p.m, local soldiers had surrounded the building and arrested the couple. During the ride, Ceausescu reportedly said jokingly, "I'd give my head for a haircut." But on Christmas Day, 1989, that journey didn't end at a barbershop, but with both of them as prisoners at the Târgoviște garrison, bringing us back to the opening of this video. The former president and his wife now stood before a drumhead court-martial, charged with genocide against the Romanian people, deliberately wrecking the economy and abusing their power by using the army against civilians. The whole trial was super short, barely 2 hours, and nobody from the outside was allowed to watch. Technically, they had the right to a lawyer and to appeal, but let's be real, the outcome was already decided. Nicolae and Elena weren't quiet or defeated in the courtroom, far from it. Right from the start, Nicolae refused to acknowledge the judges. "I don't recognize this court," he snapped. "I won't answer a single question." He pointed fingers at the officers in the room, calling them traitors, and kept insisting, "I am the president of Romania," over and over. He demanded to be tried by the now-dissolved parliament, not some military tribunal. Ellen jumped in too, calling the whole thing a setup and shouting that everything was lies. "We'll only speak at the National Assembly," she declared. "We've sacrificed everything for the people. We won't betray them here." The judges didn't entertain any of it. They brushed off the shouting, the defiance, and just moved straight to the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Death sentence. No delay, no appeal, no second chances. And just like that, the execution was set. But before it happened, Nicolae made one last request. He wanted to die alongside his wife, and they agreed. So the two of them were taken out to a courtyard, hands tied behind their backs, and lined up against a wall. Witnesses said neither of them panicked. In fact, one soldier later said Nicolae was quietly singing the Internationale as they walked him out. Then, with a shouted command, 3 paratroopers opened fire from just a few feet away. When the dust settled, the Ceausescus were dead. Their bodies were quickly covered with tarps. The dictatorship that ruled Romania for decades had ended.